I, 38-year-old female, and my husband, 37-year-old male, had our baby 4 months ago. And what a 4 months it has been. This is going to be a long one, so please be patient with me. Also typing this while juggling a child, so excuse any grammar and spelling mistakes. Firstly, I had a traumatic birth mentally due to being treated badly by staff, with it all ending in an emergency C-section where I got no skin-to-skin contact and no golden hour. We then had to stay in the hospital for an extra 3 days due to our little one, LO, having a possible infection. This stay, due to the awful hospital, was traumatic in itself, and it turned out in the end, LO had nothing wrong with them. We then went home, and my original plan was to have no visitors for a couple of weeks, but I felt guilty as everyone had been worried. So I said we would have visitors in the first week, and then go into isolation, as my breastfeeding journey had been disrupted due to nurses giving LO formula at the hospital. Long story short, my mother-in-law, MIL, 60-year-old female, visited every day for 2.5 weeks and then every other day until the drama with my sister-in-law, SL, started. Sister-in-law cheated on her fiancé of 8 years, leading mother-in-law to show up at our house to cry and hold my baby as it's good for her heart. As more information came out, it turned out the affair had been going on for months, and she had been gaslighting her fiancé and lying to all of the family, apart from me, as I had only seen her once in the 3-week period this was happening in. For me personally, I found this behavior quite triggering, as I have had this happen to me twice, leading to breakdowns. I have some complex mental health issues. As mother-in-law and father-in-law wouldn't accept her new partner, sister-in-law got back together with her fiancé and asked if she could come talk to me to explain. I declined, saying I would be keeping my distance and explaining to my husband that I had enough on my plate with LO and couldn't deal with his sister's nonsense. He understood, as he's not his sister's biggest fan. There is a 10-year age gap, and she still lives at home, so he thinks she's leeching off his mom and dad. Cut to near Christmas. Approximately 2 weeks later, his mom shows up crying and accusing me of judging her parenting skills, and that I can't ruin Christmas as her parents might die, and it's important for us to be a happy family. I had previously told her that I would be polite to sister-in-law and would still attend family gatherings, but didn't really want to socialize with sister-in-law. We only saw each other on special occasions before this. I explained that I still intended to be civil and would not cause any problems, but she continued to cry. Against my better judgment, I decided to tell her why my mental health is so bad. Previously, I had just told her a PG version when she had asked about why I was in therapy. When I told her, she just answered with, "You think I am a bad mother," completely ignoring what I had told her. She then left. I spiraled for a few days as it properly dawned on me that she doesn't care much for me at all. She just likes to play happy families, and as sister-in-law was ruining that image, I must be too. During this time, mother-in-law cried to my husband about me and complained but never spoke to me. Christmas Day happened. We got there, and as I went to place LO's things to one side, mother-in-law took LO from my husband and handed them to sister-in-law. Strike one. Then, after sister-in-law was done, she took him back and sat on the opposite side of the room with LO for 3.5 hours. We only got him back after he needed changing, and she offered to do it. My husband said no and took LO back, admitting to me it was getting weird. We stayed another 2 hours and then left. After the holidays, I invited mother-in-law and father-in-law round for dinner. We made a fuss and had a good night. As we were sitting chatting, I brought up how much mother-in-law had upset me. Father-in-law looked shocked as I don't think she had told him what had happened. She apologized to me and we hugged and hung out a bit more, then they left. We then did not see them for 2 weeks. On to the latest drama. I want to put LO into a daycare as, here in the UK, the government is making changes to childcare, and I fear that if I don't get him in this September, all the good places will be full come next year. After discussing with my mom, who I see once a week, she always texts a few days in advance to arrange and confirms visitors are okay on the day. I wanted to ask mother-in-law to come look at nurseries with us, as she worked in childcare 20-odd years ago. To say she freaked out would be an understatement. She cried at me over the phone and said she felt I was doing this to spite her. He was always going to go into nursery at age 2. I tried to explain my reasoning and how I wanted to get him into a good routine, to which father-in-law shouted down the phone that I had no idea what I was talking about. My husband was then given the silent treatment at work for a few days until he confronted them. There was lots of shouting and tears, apparently. I would like to add that mother-in-law had never spoken to me about childcare and had presumed she would have him until he was 3. I do not have to work full-time and will only be working 2 days a week until his days at nursery increase next year. Mother-in-law would have LO on a Monday afternoon until my husband finishes work, so approximately 4 hours, and eventually more when his days at nursery increase. I got a message from mother-in-law saying they had spoken to my husband and she wanted to have a chat so we could all function as a big, happy family. She was sick with a cold, so she said it would be after that. This week, she has cried to my husband multiple times about how we don't visit, I don't drive, and she does and lives 5 minutes drive, 40 minutes walk away. And yesterday, she cried about how we had never asked her to change his diaper. Now, when he was 2 weeks old, I took LO to her house to visit twice, as I felt pressured to, during which time she changed LO's diaper. If you have gotten to the end of this, then thank you. Any advice would be very appreciated. Edit. Our house rule is to ask before coming round. His family says this is too much like making an appointment, which has led to us not seeing my husband's grandparents since Boxing Day, even though they visit mother-in-law every Friday, whose house is 5 minutes from ours. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You or your husband need to message your mother-in-law. Probably just a text rather than via phone or in person, so she can actually read the words you say and make no match of misunderstanding them, and say, "We really love having you close by so you and our little one can have a relationship, but we find it overwhelming right now. We are not cutting you out, but we would like to reduce the time spent with you to reevaluate our family's needs. We are our little one's parents, and we make decisions that are best for them and for our family. Your opinions on our childcare or how we want to navigate this new chapter are not required and are overbearing. We would still like to see you. Perhaps we can meet for lunch, dinner, shopping trip in a few weeks in a neutral space." Comment 2. Her entitlement and control around your family and your life is toxic. You have to understand and accept that setting healthy boundaries with someone like that is going to upset them. She is an adult, and you can let her scream, whine, guilt, whatever. It is not you or your husband's job to placate her. He should not, by the way. He should be handling her, but he should never be apologizing for you setting boundaries. You are a new mother who has experienced a lot of stress and trauma. Everyone should be catering to you right now, and instead, you are stressing about her. You make the rules. You tell them the rules. If they don't listen to them, they don't get to see our little one. Period. Now for the update. Hey everyone, it's been 2 weeks since my last post, and boy, do I have updates for you. Things have gone from bad to worse, and I'm just at my wit's end. So after the whole nursery debacle, things seemed to calm down a bit. Mother-in-law was sick, remember? Well, she got better and decided it was time for that chat. She mentioned. She came over, all smiles, acting like nothing happened. We sat down, and she started with an apology, which honestly, I didn't buy for a second. But then, she dropped a bombshell. She said she'd been thinking and now wanted to be more involved with Elo's life. She even offered to babysit Elo every day I worked. It sounded nice, but I had a feeling there was more to it. Turns out, I was right. She wanted to babysit Elo at her house, not ours. And she wanted to do it for free, which sounds great, but it meant she'd have control over Elo's routine, food, everything. My husband and I had a long talk about it, and we decided to stick with the nursery plan. We thanked her, but said no. That's when things got ugly. She accused us of not trusting her and said we were denying her the right to bond with her grandchild. She even brought up how she raised 3 kids of her own, as if I didn't know. My husband tried to calm her down, but she stormed out, saying we'd regret this. The next day, my husband got an earful from father-in-law at work, He said we were being disrespectful and that family should always come first. My husband stood his ground, though, and I'm proud of him for that. But wait, it gets worse. Remember sister-in-law, the one who cheated on her fiancé? Well, she's back with her ex, and guess who's pregnant? Yep, sister-in-law. And mother-in-law is over the moon about it. She's been parading sister-in-law around, showing off the ultrasound pictures, and completely ignoring the fact that sister-in-law wrecked her fiancé's life. It's like she's replaced LO with sister-in-law's unborn baby. And the kicker? Mother-in-law has been telling everyone that we're keeping LO away from her on purpose, that we're bad parents for choosing a nursery over family. She's turned the whole family against us. We've been getting cold shoulders and judgmental looks at every family event. Just yesterday, we bumped into my husband's grandparents at the grocery store. They barely said 2 words to us and completely ignored LO. It was heartbreaking. These are the same grandparents who used to visit mother-in-law every Friday, just 5 minutes from our house, but haven't bothered to see us since Boxing Day. It's like we're being punished for wanting to do what's best for our child. And the worst part? My husband's family doesn't see it. They're all blinded by mother-in-law's manipulation. So here we are, trying to navigate this mess. We're sticking to our guns about the nursery, but it feels like we're fighting a losing battle. Every time we think things are settling down, something else happens. It's exhausting. I'm trying to focus on the positives, like how LO is growing and thriving, but it's hard when there's so much negativity around us. I just wish mother-in-law could see that we're not trying to hurt her, we're just trying to do what's best for our family. I found my bio dad's Facebook at 18 and was disappointed, but now my mom says he wants to talk to me. I'm hesitant because I don't want to get emotional and give him satisfaction. I, 25-year-old female, don't even know where to start. Growing up, I always wondered why my father did not want to be a part of my life. I imagine that he must have been a really accomplished and important person for me to not be enough for him. I tried to picture him countless times because, you see, I didn't have a name, didn't have a picture. I had no idea who he was because everyone around me acted like my stepdad was my dad. But I knew. I always knew that he wasn't the one. It wasn't until I turned 18 that my mom finally told me his name and showed me his Facebook account. I am not going to lie, it was a disappointment. I started right then to believe that maybe it was a good thing that he had not been in my life after all. Maybe it was out of spite, but my mom had worked really hard to give me the best education. I've gone to college and am getting ready for law school right now, while my biological father doesn't seem to have invested in his children as much. Or maybe this is what I'm telling myself to make me feel better about not having had him in my life like they did. Once I knew who he was, my curiosity died down and I focused on other parts of my life, like spending thousands in therapy healing from years of emotional abuse from my mom. Then today, almost 26 years too late, my mom tells me my biological dad has been reaching out to her, asking to talk to me. It was quite a shock because why now? Does he need a kidney? Part of my liver? I told her I'd get back to her on that, but I don't think I can do it. Don't get me wrong, I don't necessarily want to refuse because I want to know why. I want to hear whatever nonsense he is going to say, but I am hesitating because I'm scared. I'll just melt into that 7-year-old little girl who needed her dad and cry in front of him. I don't want to give him the satisfaction. Not that I think crying would have any effect on him anyway, because we are talking about someone who cheated on his wife with my mom when mom was barely 17, and he was in his 30s. We're talking about a man who walked away from his child for freaking 25 years. What can I honestly expect from someone like this? I'm also upset that he thinks he gets to just ask for my number, like I'm some sort of a playground where he can walk out and walk back in whenever he wants. My first instinct is to not make it too easy for him to have access to me, but then what would being difficult accomplish? I do want to know. I want answers, even though I don't know yet what questions I would even ask. I know this needs to be done on my terms, but I'm not exactly sure what my terms should be. I'm so confused. Has anyone gone through this? How was your experience? Please help. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You say your mom was emotionally hurtful for years, but you're also taking everything she's telling you at face value. How do you know this random person she showed you on Facebook is really your father? How do you know he's only now trying to reach out? Your mom could have given you a great education and told you a pack of lies about your dad for who knows what reason. Get the number, email, whatever. Talk to him, figure out the truth. No point playing games about it. Might be he confirms everything your mom said. Might be she's been giving you a very spun version of what happened. Comment 2. To be fair, your mom put you through years of emotional abuse. For whatever reason, she tried to convince you that your stepfather was your dad. I'm not saying this is the case, but what if your mother decided to cut your biological dad out of your life? Have you ever asked your mom if your dad reached out through the years? It is possible that they both just did an incredibly shitty job at being parents. I don't know. I'm sorry you're going through this, though. Now for the update. Hey everyone. Thanks for all the comments and advice on my last post. It's been a wild few days, and I've got quite the update for you all. So, after a lot of thinking, I decided to meet my biological dad. I figured I needed closure, or at least some answers. I told my mom to give him my number, and he texted me almost immediately. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop the next day. I spent the night tossing and turning, trying to prepare myself for any possible scenario. When I walked into the coffee shop, my heart was racing. I spotted him sitting at a corner table. He looked older than his Facebook pictures, and there was an awkwardness in his smile. We exchanged hellos, and then he started talking. He told me about his life, his regrets, and how he always wanted to reach out but didn't know how. I listened, not sure what to feel. Then he dropped a bombshell. He told me that he had been diagnosed with a terminal illness. He didn't have much time left and wanted to make amends. I was stunned. I didn't know whether to be angry that he only reached out because of his illness or sad that he was dying. I asked him about the past, about why he left, and why he never tried to contact me before. He explained that after the affair with my mom, his life fell apart. He lost his job, his wife left him, and he spiraled into a dark place. He thought staying away was the best thing for me. I could see the pain in his eyes, but it was hard to feel sorry for him. We talked for hours, and I learned a lot about him. He had other kids, my half-siblings, who he also had a strained relationship with. He wasn't the accomplished man I had imagined as a child. He was just a guy with a lot of mistakes and a lot of regrets. As we were leaving, he asked if he could hug me. I hesitated, but eventually gave in. It was a strange feeling, hugging the man who had caused me so much pain without even being there. But it also felt like a piece of me was being filled. A piece I didn't even know was empty. Over the next couple of days, we met a few more times. He told me stories about his life, and I started to see him as a flawed human, not just the shadowy figure from my past. But it was a lot to process, and I was emotionally drained. Then, another twist. My half-sister reached out to me. She had heard from our dad that he'd met me and wanted to connect. I was hesitant but curious. We met for lunch, and it was surreal. She looked a bit like me, and we had some similar mannerisms. She told me about growing up with our dad in and out of her life. It wasn't easy for her either. We shared stories about our lives, and I felt a connection I hadn't expected. It was nice to have someone who understood, someone who shared my blood. We promised to keep in touch, and I left feeling a mix of happiness and sadness. Now, I'm back to my routine, trying to process everything. Meeting my dad and my half-sister has opened up a lot of old wounds, but it's also given me some closure. I'm still not sure how I feel about my dad. I'm angry and hurt, but I also feel a strange sense of compassion for him. I'm trying to focus on law school and my future, but it's hard not to think about the past few days. It's been a journey of emotions, and I'm still trying to find my footing. Mom's been acting weird for 6 months, and I suspect she has dementia. But when I tell Dad, he says, "This is a really weird situation, and I'm not 100% sure what I'm talking about since I'm not a specialist in dementia Alzheimer. But basically, my mother has become a completely different person in the last 6 months, and I'm becoming so concerned with it that I am thinking of asking my father to take her to the doctor." Background. My mother has always been the most compassionate, empathetic, rational, and calm person I have ever known. She's intelligent, loves to read, and always had a rational but emotionally in tune solution to everything. Admittedly, she's played the family therapist countless times, and I don't think anyone in my family could ever repay her for. However, all of this changed when I moved back in with my parents 6 months ago after a stint of bad luck where my girlfriend dumped me and moved out, and I had to scramble together cash for rent and bills after I had just been let go during layoffs at my work. It wasn't pretty, but my parents were happy to welcome me back in with them. I noticed upon moving back that something was just different about my mom. She seemed really impatient, less caring and curt with me. And I noticed her snapping at my father more too. I chalked this up to a few bad days, which turned into weeks. I thought maybe she was actually mad or disappointed with me for being back at home. Something that would have really shocked me to begin with, since my mom is very nurturing. But after chatting with her, she assured me that she was happy to have me back. It was little things at first, but then it got worse. Soon, everything I had to say she took really crossly. For example, I was walking in our garage with the lights off, stupid I know, and knocked our garbage can over. My mom came to investigate, and I told her with a laugh, "Oh, just knocked some stuff over. Guess it's kind of dark in here." And she immediately snapped, "I know my garage is dirty. I will clean it soon." Which took me off guard, but I just figured that maybe she misheard me and I rectified the situation. No biggie. However, she's been doing that a lot lately. I'll say something, anything, and she'll respond aggressively about something off topic as if I had insulted her or insinuating something bad. She is also terrified of seemingly normal things now. She almost refuses to drive without my father and I with her, and one evening we could smell smoke through the house because of our neighbors using their wood-burning stove. This is a normal occurrence, and we could see the smoke from the neighbor's chimney. Anyways, Mom was distraught, tearing through the house looking for fire, and wondering if she should call the fire department until Dad and I talked her down. Now the biggie. Yesterday, I was ranting to my parents, having a beer with my dad, and lamenting about my life circumstances. Admittedly, I was getting a little heated, but suddenly my mom let out this tremendous scream. This "ah!" which my dad and I nearly fell out of our chairs, and we stared at her like she had two heads, and she just started yelling, "Stop yelling at me!" My dad and I talked her down, but she broke apart and started talking about the abuse she endured as a child. Something that she's never done before, at least not like this. My mother and I have had discussions about how she grew up, but she had never fully lost her cool over it, and in such a random way before. It was scary. Afterwards, my father walked my mom to their bedroom and she went to sleep. My dad came out and we were both kind of speechless, not sure what to do or really what to say to each other, so we had an early night. I got to reflecting, and the whole thing just made me feel really bothered. There was clearly something going on with my mom, and there were other things that I noticed too. For example, my mom came around to find me while I was shoveling snow to ask how to cook a ham, which we just had a simple conversation about, and it didn't immediately raise any red flags. But my mom taught me how to cook. She knows how to cook hams, and has done so possibly hundreds of times in her life. I thought maybe she was just lonely and was maybe asking how I wanted it cooked, but now I'm not so sure. One of the most frightening things, though, is that I have heard her a few times during the night opening my door to my bedroom to check on me as I sleep. I know this is what she is doing because she used to do it when I was a child. Again, I figured maybe old habits die hard, but she's never done this before in my adult life, and actually she stopped her nightly check-ins when I was 17. It's making me think something is really wrong with my mom, and I want to ask my dad to bring her in to see a doctor and get tested for dementia. However, my dad is an incredibly proud man, and I think doing this would definitely be offensive to both him and my mom. However, I don't know what else to do. My mom is not the same woman I grew up with. I know people change as they get older, but I can tell she's suffering, either by something like dementia or otherwise. I don't know. Please help. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. If she was checking on you every night until you were 17, that to me says she has always been a very anxious person. It's not normal to have to check on a teenage kid at night, unless there's a reason like secretly leaving the house or being ill. Going through menopause can cause women who have never been anxious before to become anxious. And it can make those of us who already have anxiety to become even more anxious. If you don't do anything about it and have never sought treatment for anxiety, it can worsen over time. Your mom might not have dementia, just very severe anxiety. Either way, she needs to see a doctor about it. Comment 2. I'm going through something similar with my dad. What I've done is asked my mother to have him evaluated by his doctor. Unfortunately, they have the same doctor, and my dad made the exact same complaints about her. So we're stuck in a stalemate. One thing to consider is having her checked for a urinary tract infection, UTI. UTIs can mimic cognitive problems and should be ruled out. There is also the possibility of a brain tumor or other issues, which can be quite concerning. Therefore, your first step should be taking her to her primary care doctor. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the comments and advice on my last post. It's been a hectic couple of weeks, and I've got some updates that I think you'll find pretty shocking. So, after the incident where my mom screamed at me for no reason, I decided to have a serious talk with my dad. I was nervous because, as I mentioned before, he's a proud man, but I couldn't just sit back and watch my mom spiral. I brought up my concerns, and to my surprise, he admitted he'd noticed changes in her behavior too. He agreed it was time to seek medical help. We managed to convince my mom to see a doctor, and after several tests, the diagnosis came back: early onset Alzheimer's. It was a tough pill to swallow. My mom, the rock of our family, the one who always had the answers, was now facing a future where she might not even recognize us. The doctor prescribed some medication to help manage her symptoms, and we started looking into support groups. It was a relief to have a plan, but the reality of the situation was heartbreaking. Now, here's where things get really crazy. A few days after the diagnosis, I was helping my mom sort through some old boxes in the attic, and I stumbled upon a bunch of old letters. They were love letters, but not from my dad. They were from some guy named Mark, someone I'd never heard of before. Curious and a bit shocked, I confronted my mom about the letters. At first, she was confused, but then, as if a switch flipped, she started reminiscing about Mark with such clarity. It was like she was her old self again. She told me about this passionate affair she had before she married my dad. It was a side of my mom I never knew existed. I was reeling from this revelation when my dad walked in. He saw the letters in my hand and the look on my mom's face, and I could see the hurt in his eyes. He knew about Mark. It turned out my dad had known about the affair all along, but he loved my mom so much that he forgave her and they moved on. But wait, it gets even more complicated. My dad confessed that he had always been worried that I might not actually be his son. The timeline of the affair and my mom's pregnancy with me were too close for comfort. He never pursued a paternity test because he didn't want to know the truth. He chose to raise me as his own, no matter what. I was floored. My entire life, I thought I knew who I was, who my parents were, and now it felt like everything was a lie. My mom, with her condition, fluctuated between moments of lucidity and confusion, so getting more answers from her was nearly impossible. The atmosphere at home became tense. My dad was trying to process old wounds that had been reopened, and I was struggling with my identity. It was like our family was on the brink of falling apart. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get any more intense, another surprise dropped. My mom had another episode, but this time she was frantically searching for something. She kept saying she needed to find the proof. My dad and I were puzzled until she pulled out an old, faded photograph from behind a loose brick in the fireplace. It was a picture of her, young and radiant, standing beside Mark. On the back, there was a date and a message that read, "The day we learned about our miracle." The date was just a couple of months before my mom married my dad. I didn't know what to think. Was Mark my biological father? Was this miracle referring to me? My dad, seeing the photo, sat down heavily on the couch, his face a mix of pain and resignation. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.